on that.
Yeah.
Good.
My duties.
All right. So we are recording, and it is January 13th. Can you believe it? January is already half over practically. And we're finishing up. So this will just be, we'll do maybe 2 more weeks of stories. And then we'll get started on falling upward and be working on getting your book and all of that. And I need to get the word out as to when we actually start, which would be a good idea to actually have a date, huh? If we did 2 more weeks of Desert Stories, I don't know if we can, we can probably milk it. That would take us to 1, 2, 3, I'm sorry, 2, February 2nd. Let's say February 2nd, right at the beginning of February is going to be the start of the new book. That's
Groundhog's Day.
a nice dividing line right there. So I'll start getting the word out on the new book and the start date, and we will make this last. And if we run out of stories by the end of January, then we'll just talk for a whole hour and laugh. That wouldn't be so bad. I could definitely go for that.
I think we could do it.
I think we could too. We'll find something to talk about.
The laughing Buddhas.
Yeah. All right, let me share the screen. Okay. Can you guys see all of that?
Oh, yeah.
Can you make that bigger?
You make it more bigger.
Make
Yeah,
it
more
bigger.
bigger.
Make it
More
more
bigger.
bigger. Let's see
More,
what I
more
can
bigger, more bigger.
do.
A
120.
little bit
How's that?
Well,
Better.
Better.
Still small.
I can't
Or
read
how
it.
about if I just use my magnifying glass?
Hey, Danielle, have you fallen lately, dear?
No falls and no curses to fall, please. Oh,
You're in the old fart category, Danielle.
All right, let me see. I think I can make this a little bigger. It's just taking a little more to navigate around the screen, but we can do it. We can do it. We can.
This
All
is
right.
good.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite stories. I know this one by heart and I quote it often. A novice went to Abbot Macarius seeking advice about the best way to please the Lord. Go to the cemetery and insult the dead, said Macarius. And the brother did as he was told. The following day, he returned to Macarius. Did they respond? Asked the abbot. The novice said, no, they didn't. Then go to them and praise them. The novice obeyed. That same afternoon, he returned to the abbot, who again wished to know whether the dead had responded. No, said the novice. In order to please the Lord, behave as they do, said Macarius. Pay no heed to the insults of men, nor to their praise. In this way, you shall forge your own path. Go insult the dead. So you can just imagine him walking around and yelling at headstones, right? And then doing the same thing to praise the dead. When you can respond to the insults and the praises of men as the dead do, then you are getting close to the Lord and pleasing the Lord. This is back to that idea, not only of unoffendability, but unflatterability, right?
Right.
These were huge virtues of the ancient church. Where did they go? Now it's a virtue to be offended and to stand up, and seek social justice. And then, yeah, flattery. It seems like so many of us, especially in church leadership, are looking for that. Maybe that's the reason we got into this business in the first place, to be able to be approved. But this idea of being completely unoffendable, we've talked about this from time to time. Does that feel like a virtue to you? Or is it something that we need to somehow mitigate?
I'll
Are we
let you
supposed
know
to be
as soon as I
offended?
pull it off.
All right. Are there things we're supposed to be offended at, in other words?
I don't know. We talk about this state, a potential state of egolessness. And certainly in the absence of ego, it'd be impossible to be either offended or complimented, because it wouldn't matter. It has no meaning whatsoever.
Mhm.
Mhm. So I'm thinking of the days when Beth was throwing things at the television set.
Which I have stopped. Just to note, everybody, I
That-
stopped.
I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
What changed?
Pardon?
What changed?
Working on myself. This
Broken
group,
television set.
what is it? What?
Broken television set.
Yeah, Rona.
The metal
It's-
frame in front of the set.
It's a tough room.
It is.
This group, working through what we've been working through, trying to, I think, trying to understand, and Brady and I have been talking a lot about this, and this is going to be our second book. I'm working on our first right now. But it's going to be, you know, the fear, trying to understand what underlies this incredible, behavior we're seeing from people, and trying to understand it's the fear, I think, that drives so much of it. And, I don't know, I certainly as a therapist don't know how to, get through to that. But I think just understanding is awareness. And that has really helped me, even though I get a little irritated and I have to stay away. I have to stay away from some comments and some, news items for sure. Because I just, it scares me, and that's what it does. It brings up the fear in me. It's like, good Lord, we're on the verge of civil, distress and riots, I don't know, another civil war, I don't know. But really this group has helped, and looking at myself and trying to understand the other, quote, other side, people who are afraid of losing jobs, of losing their place in the world. So does that answer? Does that help?
I think so. So follow-up question is, how safe will your TV be if Trump runs again in 2024 and or wins?
That's a tough one, Dave.
Because I was wondering how much of your unoffendability went away with the last president.
Quite a bit.
But this is the thing, and so the progress you've made is great, and I don't want to take anything away from that seriously. But are there things we're supposed to be offended at? Is this a lovely sentiment from a different age, and they just don't know our world? What do you think? Does it still apply?
If nobody was offended by anything, would we have made the progress in our society? On some level, I don't know if I would say offended is the word.
Right.
Probably
Yeah.
people felt inspired. They saw a need, something that wasn't right in the world, and they created things. They created services, they created products. So I think that our society is kind of based on that. But I think what differentiates, inspiration from, being offended or whatever is, what was I going to say?
Oh, you were just going to the most important part of the whole thing.
Ego. Is ego.
Right.
Ah.
Differentiating factor.
Right.
Or maybe not, because people who are, in producing products in large businesses, I'm sure there's ego there. So that's not a differentiating, but maybe that's what differentiates the factor for us walking a spiritual path, is how much of ego is invested in it, as opposed to I see a need and I'm not offended by the homeless people on the street, but I see a need and we do something. It inspires me.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
But-
get, you think about the word offended, you can see, I think you can detect ego in there, that it somehow means something to you. There's some kind of personal investment. But we are regularly horrified, um, have a sense of righteous indignation. I mean, we do have revulsion. There's no ego, I don't think, in those terms. And we do experience those things in regards to acts that we witness.
Because then it becomes apathy, you guys, right? Then we become apathetic. And I don't think that that's being engaged in our world. I don't think that's what Jesus,
Mm-mm.
the example that he set with his life. He certainly was not apathetic.
But was he
No.
offended?
I
Was he?
think,
Yeah.
I
Well,
think
he was
offend-
with the money changers. I
Yeah,
think.
Yes, at the
Yes.
money changers
Was
at the
he?
temple.
Offended?
He was mad.
He was
Outrage.
angry.
Outrage.
Not the same thing.
So what's
William,
the
what are you trying to
difference?
get in there, William? Go ahead.
I was thinking of, the kind of anger that like a civil rights leader might have. Like the kind of like a lawyer in court who is defending an injustice, and he's offended by the whatever, and he's mad, and it's awesome and it's beautiful. And yeah, I think there are things that should offend us, like client I had right before coming on here, her son recently died of a drug overdose.
Mhm.
And it came to light after his death that he was sexually molested by an uncle,
Figures.
something along those lines. Yeah, get offended,
So what,
Yeah.
do you not agree with the insulting against?
I think I agree with it as an arrow pointing to an ideal. I agree with it in terms of it bringing to awareness this conversation about the ego and the role of the ego and what it means to be functioning from ego. But I think, well, yeah, I think, like Lao Tzu would say, when the wind blows, the branch sways, it's like we respond to things, it's part of our humanness, just like Christ responded to things.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you're making that particular distinction with Christ about offended specifically. I guess there's no way for us to know if he was offended in the temple when he was, getting rid of the people doing business in there. But it seemed like he was. My understanding was that he was whipping people and, overturning tables and so on. So he seemed pretty upset.
So I guess maybe we need a better way to define offend.
Yeah.
And that would
Yeah.
really help us. And I'm thinking for my money, and the way that this works for me is that disturbance without awareness is offense. Because I think the biggest deal here is people who, I remember when we were trying to help my dad who had dementia. And after a while, you think you're losing your mind too, when you're treating with someone who's got Alzheimer's or dementia now. And I remember mentioning that to his neurologist when I took him for an appointment. And the neurologist laughed and he said, if you can remember that you forgot, you don't have dementia. The people who have dementia are not aware that they have dementia. They're living in a completely different world. And I think the people who are offended don't know that they're offended, but they react from that deep place of ego. But if you have the awareness that your disturbance and that this wrong that needs to be righted motivates you to do it, and you can act with awareness so that your actions, like Martin Luther King or Mohandas Gandhi, have weight and impact and are going in the right direction. I don't think that we can call that the offense that they're talking about. Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
I think it's a matter of identification then.
That's
If your
not bad.
if the identification is with ego, then
Yes.
being
Okay.
offended is something different. But if your identification is with social justice, if your identification is right, if your
Cause.
identification is with love and compassion,
Yes.
then
Jeff?
it means something very different to me. It just changed my mind.
Yes.
That's good. That's good. So maybe it's as simple as saying, are you taking it personally or not? See, I see Jesus in the temple as defending the people who were being shelled out of their
Right.
personal connection with God.
Right.
And when Jesus acted in any way affirmatively and with that kind of vigor, he was defending somebody. Just read, is it Matthew 23, the 7 woes? And he goes after the Pharisees with everything that you can do in Aramaic, right? But he's defending his people because they were the ones who were keeping them from their God. And so I think maybe it has to do with taking it personally. It has to do with identification. It has to do with lack of awareness that we would say that offense is something that we need to work against. And I think that's what Beth is talking about. She spent much more time over this past year and a half, becoming more aware,
Yes.
of her feelings, of what triggers and how she responds, and she's mitigating all of those things. I think it has something to do with awareness.
I've kind of been, it's funny that this comes up today because for the last couple of weeks, I've been struggling with my living surroundings, the apartment complex. I chose it based on a website. Boy, and the website showed a beautiful gym, beautiful pool, places to barbecue, and, being in, multimedia for years and years, I should have known better. But this was the slickest website that you could probably build. Beautiful images of these upwardly mobile people, kind of a higher standard, okay? And so now that I'm here and it's 180 degrees the opposite way, it offended me. I also got to the point where I was asking, do I think I'm better than anybody else, and why can't I live here? Is my ego growing to the point where why can't I just live anywhere, and with any type of people? Why do I think that I'm on a higher standard? But I've never lived like this in a place like this in my whole life, so I'm struggling with that. I think about if you lived in India, holy mosey, God darn. But yeah, so I've really, this is really good because, again, I've tried to say, I've usually had my ego in pretty good check, and I can reflect on what's happening in the moment to say, yeah, okay, my thoughts are within reason and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm really trying to say it doesn't matter. My life is my life. I can make my apartment look as cool as I want it to look. I don't care what anybody else thinks, so I have Southwest pictures everywhere and, neat rugs, Navajo style rug. And it's funny because people, when I open my door, people are sticking their head in my door when I don't know it and checking out my apartment. But in terms of the ego, I've had to question myself a lot as to what my intent of my feelings are. But anyway, my 2 cents.
Thank you for sharing that, Tony. It's, I think, very honest, and Brady and I've been in this through a similar situation when we lost everything in our home in Scottsdale, and so I really appreciate that. And yes, we needed to be humbled is what we needed to be, and we are looking at it like that and really kind of set us straight. So I really appreciate your honesty and sharing that.
Okay, thank you.
And I wanted to have a counter thought there to Tony's share. I think Daniel alluded to this idea earlier, like there's kind of like a dissatisfaction that is present with us a lot of times with many aspects of our lives. And that dissatisfaction could be a good thing. You know, it's like the desire to improve your stat or the desire to living in a nicer environment or whatever the case might be. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think there's part of the ego, I guess, would be a healthy part of the ego, I suppose, you know, might want you to live in a nicer space, you know, for whatever reason. And I don't see that as inherently anything good or bad.
It might depend on the individual. You know, for us, I think we probably needed that. But for somebody else, I can see that, William. I think it's a good point.
Yeah. Yeah. Beth knows this, and Doug knows it because he was around. We were good friends at this time, but 30 years ago, I mean, I was just lost, and the big house, and you know, the sports car, and living on a golf course and golf club and all that kind of stuff was way too important for me. I mean, it was all about ego. It was an incredible blessing for that all to blow up. Incredible blessing. It was a good fall.
So how did you feel about it at the time? Now, in retrospect, you can say,
immediately just distressed and troubled, but pretty quickly, I felt like my eyes had been opened. Pretty quickly.
Yeah. So what are we really talking about here? Obviously, we're talking about freedom, right? The freedom not to be led around by the nose, the tail wagging the dog in terms of either the offenses or the insults. The freedom to be exactly who you are. The freedom to show up in a moment and let the moment dictate the response rather than any of your leftover egoic needs for approval or whatever happens.
May I add something?
Absolutely.
I've been digging around. Do you guys all remember the movie The Great Debaters with Denzel Washington?
Yes. We know the title.
Yeah, it was a Southern Black college, and it was a true story in the 1930s, and they went on the national scene, and they actually went to the finals and debated at Harvard for real.
Oh, wow.
And it's a fantastic movie. So you got these young kids, and there's a scene where, and I have the quote here I wanted to dig out that I think we're talking about. There's a scene where you had the kids who were debating standing on the shore. Did anybody remember this? And he was out on a boat on a body of water, and he had them stuff their mouths full of whatever, something. So they had to force themselves to project themselves. And he repeated what I would like to read to you here real quick. It's just a few lines over and over and over. And I think it's what we're talking about. But in a debate, there's a judge. Well, I think when we encounter people who are either reinforcing or problem, there's a debate inside of us, and we are quickly judging, or they are. And so I think it applies. I used to have this on my desk. I'd try to read it every day and maybe applied it like 2%. But so here's the litany that he had them say over and over and over again. He would yell out, "Who is the judge?" And with their mouths full, they had to project loudly, "The judge is God." This is in a debate. The judge is God. And Denzel Washington said, "And why is he God?" And they were supposed to say, "Because he decides who wins and loses, not my opponent," which is a projection, whoever we think the opponent is. And then he'd say, "Who is your opponent?" And he'd have them yell, "He does not exist." And he'd say, "Why doesn't he exist?" And then their concluding line is, "Because he is a dissenting voice to the truth I speak."
Wow.
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 It's powerful.
That
Yeah,
is.
that's powerful.
And it's certainly recognizing the dissent and the whatever problem and the hostility and so forth. But it's not concluding who has to be the final judge and who has the final control.
Mm.
But that goes out the window after about 2 seconds if once the adrenaline gets going, or I'm pretty sure I'm right.
Which is when it becomes personal again, right?
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. So I think we're coming back to that. That thing
And
I-
Dave, I was thinking too that you said something about freedom, and what made me think of all the times that I've been offended at something, or I've seen my friends or family be offended. It usually falls into the category of they're feeling taken advantage of in some way. So maybe that in a turn is kind of a loss of freedom. And the voices get louder, and and that kind of thing. And you can tell it's taking on this whole personal touch with that particular person. They're taking it on very differently now. So you can see the offense just building in them because now it's personal and they're losing control and they're being taken advantage of in some way, shape, or form. And maybe we can say that about injustice too, watching injustices that you're seeing people being taken advantage of in some sense.
Yeah.
But usually offense is pointing out something in you that is still as yet unfinished.
Right.
That's why it hits you so
It
hard
feels
at that-
uncomfortable.
at that
Right.
subconscious level. I
Right.
sometimes use the shorthand, if you call me a fat Asian man, I'm not going to take a lot of offense to that, but if you tell me you've been a terrible father,
Yeah.
that is going to hit me because pastoring has been so, just swallows you whole and been so all encompassing that I'm worried that I haven't given my kids enough time. And so I think the offense that you take is that's why you should pay attention to the things that offend you, because they're pointing out stuff that you need to know.
Yeah. I have one example that I thought about that kind of always stuck with me. I had this great, really wonderful HR generalist that worked for me back in the day, and she was dealing with a very difficult employee who had performance issues, and they were going to have to do a termination and all of this. Well, this employee was getting more and more vicious and more attacking, and they're all out to get me, and my manager hates me, and this HR person hates me, and all of that kind of stuff. And the HR person came kind of storming into my office saying, I am offended at her saying this, that she hates me and blah, blah, blah. And I just said, whoa, 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 time out. You cannot get offended. You are in the neutral zone. It doesn't matter what she says to you. She could say you're fat, ugly, or whatever. You have to put that hat on that just says you are completely unoffendable in this situation. And she had to just come. It must have pushed a button. And makes me think about that, Dave, that there must have been something that was pushed for her, because now I had to remove her from that situation, and someone else had to step in and deal with that termination, because now there was this personal thing between the two of them. So it was, sometimes you need to know your role when not to be offendable. You cannot do it in the neutral zone, and that was really hard, and I didn't see that until later.
I think it also helps to have a target of what you're fighting for instead of just fighting against the hostility.
Right.
That's good.
But I think that takes really deep, strong preparation over and over and over. I don't think you can just say, oh, I'll try to remember that. In fact, that's a question I had to this group for all that we're learning. How do you apply it that you think is useful, and how have you applied it that you think has failed? The method, not examples or experiences, the method of applied behavior analysis. How do you apply this stuff? Because if you just think I think it's just interesting, it's fascinating, and good news, that doesn't mean I apply it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to know what works and what doesn't work in your application efforts.
Anybody want to jump in on that one?
I'll tell you what doesn't work is posting on God Speaks Facebook page.
and wearing a robe and a halo.
It doesn't, and I keep going back, and that does not work. So there you have it.
We won't do that.
I guess I can speak to that a little bit. The stuff that I've learned from Dave and, in these recent books, first the book with the shadow, and the one we just finished there, The Way of the Heart. Being at home with my family and, stepping back. We bought this house 30 years ago. So I'm stepping back into my childhood room, basically. And it's amazing the memories of different events that are just somehow triggered by the walls, and it really helped me significantly to, think with the heart, like whatever that looks like for you, and I can clearly go from logical understanding where I know I'm 100% right. I'm a psychologist, I'm a trained clinician, I understand these things. And I can see as my understanding becomes clearer, so does my anger and my judgment. and I can see what happens when I just decide to, okay, let's look at this through the heart. What does that look like? And how much it changes things when I think about what the relationship demands and apply it. I'm doing it with my brother. I'm doing it with my siblings, my sister and the other brother who's not here, with my nephew, and I'm doing it every day with my mom. And it's been more than serendipitous. It's just been God sent that we were going through that book when I came back home for this little chapter in my journey, and I believe it's really helped me clinically, working with clients and kind of trying to reframe things, no matter who the person is you're looking at. If we could understand that person's struggle from, this is how they're trying to be loved. This is their dysfunctional way of saying, love me, please. Whatever that might look like. If you can get beneath that, whatever's on the surface, and get beneath that, we all want to be loved, and we're all trying to, some strategy to get some of it, and when it's withdrawn or when it's in doubt, we have reactions to it. And, when it's too close, we have reactions to that, and so on and so forth. So this lens, especially when I'm doing couples work, like this lens of thinking with the heart that came out of The Way of the Heart was just beautiful. I have cried more with clients in the last 6 months than I've cried with clients in the last 6 years, maybe. And like some of our conversations, like, I think maybe I'm just becoming a better clinician. And the spiritual piece tied in with the clinical piece, and using this kind of contemplative approach to heal an anxious heart. I get to, even if I'm not applying it in my own life, I get to explain how to apply it to other people, and that kind of fortifies it a lot more for me. So yeah, right now I'm trying as much as possible and to, this prayer ceaselessly thing, every time I remember, every time I find a cue to remember, like that's where I want to be, like in this, engaging in the relationships, engaging in the whatever is going on in the real life. We were talking last night about, what if this is as good as it gets, like dealing with life on those terms, like this is what it is, anyhow, I'm rambling here, but yeah, that's my recent take on some of this.
That's great, William. Actually, I'm still stuck on the fact that 30 years ago gets you into childhood. So I forget how young you are, buddy.
You call that fuzzy math.
Anyway, that's anybody else? So the original question was, how do we apply this stuff? How do we apply it to make it real so that it comes off of the theoretical page, out of the ether, and into something that actually is life-changing? Anybody else have a take on that?
Yeah, when you think about it, when I think about it, it's everyday thing. As we learn these different things and we put them into practice, we try some and keep the ones that work and get rid of the ones that don't. It's life application.
Mhm. So William, it's starting to lead more with the heart, become more emotionally involved, and Scott, okay, it's continuing to apply things. I think for me, it's got to be absolutely immediate. It's got to be concrete and immediate. It's something that happens in the moment. So it's very CBT in that respect, that it's the building of awareness, so that when we get to that point of stimulus and response, we open up that space and we can make that different choice. And every time we make a different choice based on some principle that we're learning here more abstractly, then we're taking another brick out of the wall that separates us from our true self. But it has to be absolutely immediate and based in the moment and the situation of the moment. We tend to want to retreat back into more conceptual, put that conceptual blanket on. It's kind of comforting to do that, and to think in generalities, or to think that there's some overall switch we can flip that fixes everything. But it's really not. We're only changing a single decision in the moment, but those add up like those pearls on the string. And so for me to apply something, and this is what I'm always trying to get across to anybody I'm working with, is you start with the general, get to the specific, and that'll lead you back to the general again, but you don't deal in generalities. Take the general principle, but it has to be applied like a rifle shot to whatever is right in front of you. And it's awareness and opposite action, and just keep practicing that over and over again. And it'll change your character over time, but it's still just one choice at a time. And that never changes. No matter how evolved we get, we're still just a person with a moment that contains a choice. And what are you going to do with it? And that never changes.
Dave, how do you remind yourself to do it? And what's it look like when you succeed? And what's it look like when you fail?
When I abjectly fail?
When the strategy doesn't work.
Yeah, well, when I abjectly fail during a day, okay, I don't even realize I've failed. It's kind of like Alzheimer's again, right? I'm so caught up in the moment, it is closed over on myself, that I don't even realize that I'm doing it again and making the choices to stay in that place. There are some times, though, that I can get out above the moment enough to say, this is what I'm being triggered to do, and this is what I need to do, but I don't just freaking have the energy right now, so I'm just going to go with the flow. And then on a good day, I can reverse the tide.
Yeah.
And I just choose connection, reconnect, and I feel better.
Yeah.
and I have energy, and I, you know, it's like that. But it's that same choice over and over again.
What kind of ways do you use a brake pedal when you're with people, either you're working with or others, when you're in a good place, but you're also saying, I'm not going to do that?
Well, first of all, when I feel offended, it's like that robot in Lost in Space, Danger, Will Robinson. I mean, all of the lights start going on inside, and I have to be very, very careful. I can't tell you how many texts I have written that were probably, you know, that long, that just get wiped out, and I just say, love you. You know, it's amazing how many I can, you know, to censor myself and to stop and think, you know, this is what I want to say. I feel justified in saying it, but where is this going to lead? And then, you know, it's that kind of self-review.
Yeah.
And I thank God for the text, because that gives you time to do it. It's harder if you're in real time. They've already seen your facial expression, you know, and so, but it's that taking the breath, that stopping, that awareness, and that the next word out of my mouth, is this going to bring this relationship closer together or blow it apart, you know, and try to choose that.
Within a relationship, how do you set good limits that invites relationship? How do you say no that invites a relationship?
How do you say no that invites a relationship? Well, a part of it is getting to a place where if something is breakable, let's break it now. That's become one of my my internal principles. In other words, not try to hold something together with chewing gum and duct tape so that it can fall apart in 2 months or 5 years, but just go in, be yourself, let the other person decide if this is something for them or not. And so setting those kind of boundaries, being yourself, being free enough to get walked away from, you know, to be rejected, I suppose, is part of this offense and flattery.
That's the principle. What are the words you use?
What word? Oh, well, that
What
would,
language do you use?
that would
I
totally,
mean, does it have 4 letters or is it?
I try not to ever let it have 4 letters.
Oh,
You know, one counselor told me that you always use a soft startup, is the way she put it. And so, you know,
I don't mean in counseling. I mean in your
no,
other
no,
roles.
I'm just talking about in regular
Yeah.
conversation. So if I have something difficult I have to say, I try to lead with something positive. You know, I try to establish the connection and reestablish the connection, and then move into, you know, whatever needs to be said. But, you know, usually there's no good way to deliver bad news. And so eventually you just have to say it and see what happens. But, you know, setting boundaries, being able to say no, that's been historically very hard for me, but I'm getting better at it, you know, saying what I can do, when I can do it, when I can't do, but I can do this, but not that, you know, and just being able to negotiate and navigate, you know, those kinds of issues in real time. I'm getting better at that. And it's, you know, most of the time, if you do it that way, people don't take offense. They see that you're working with them, that they see that you're giving time to them. And if they're not getting exactly what they want, unless they're very ego-based, you know, that's usually something that they're willing to work with. I'm finding.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dave, I wanted to respond to something you said earlier. You were talking about when you did it right versus when you did it wrong. I find it's just as easy, like days when I feel like I do it right in terms of being in the flow, I lose track of time as easily as when I do it wrong, where I'm daydreaming all day and kind of floating around in a fog. And they're both easy enough, I suppose. But like when I'm doing it right and I'm engaged and I'm being productive, it's not really difficult. You know, it's almost enjoyable, you know. But I can just as easily waste a few hours in that day thinking about something relatively unimportant, or I don't know, playing a game on my phone or something.
But you know, Billiam, sometimes you need to do just that. You know, that isn't necessarily wasted time. That's R&R. It's respite. It's whatever it is. It's just a matter of whether you're still moving your relationships closer together. Are you choosing connection, or are you avoiding it by doing these daydreamy things? You know, I think that's why I don't like using right and wrong. I like using what works and what doesn't work. And I think that's so important, because right and wrong implies some kind of one size fits all standard out there someplace in the ether that we're just going to apply, you know, one size fits all, rather than getting into our situation saying what works and what doesn't toward greater connection, greater unity, greater oneness. And because what worked over here in that instance is the exact opposite as over here. Like we're always saying, is lying always wrong? Well, no, sometimes lying is exactly what needs to happen in order to preserve life and relationship. And so we need to be able to bring our full selves to that moment. So that's it's more like that. It's more like feeling your way through every day, rather than having these huge principles that are supposed to guide every step. It makes it's a very different way. But I think that's exactly what Jesus is talking about in terms of being Holy Spirit led. I mean, that is such a phrase. But if we're really going to do it right, it means we're entering into the uncertainty. We're entering into the no fixed real destination. We're really here as part of a process and a journey, of course. And we're showing up to it and seeing what happens. And it's different when you apply it that way.
Well, I think coming back to Doug's pointed question, it's like I don't have a clear distinction of when you're fully there, the way you just described it, Dave. I think the language you used was being fully present to your experience. You know, when I'm fully present, I can be, you know, in the zone there. And when I'm daydreaming and disassociating and just wasting time, like I don't experience a shift in distress or something like that. You know what I mean? I don't experience something that lets me know that I've just wasted 20 minutes, you know, walking around in my room, thinking about a conversation, sometimes thinking about this group and some of our conversations, you know, where like I haven't learned anything new or had a new thought in the last hour. I've just replayed how I said certain things or how other people said things in the group in my head. And they're enjoyable, you know. I like rethinking some of our discussions, but I can lose an hour, you know, in the day, you know, in that kind of mental space, just as easily as I can engage in a productive session or something else related to work and, you know, lose a few hours of deeply engaged work.
So how do you know? How do you know what's which, right? And I think let's use the same test that Jesus used. Yeah, you're going to know the prophet by the fruit. You're going to know by what comes from it. Now, if you don't take care of enough business, it's going to start ruining relationships in your life, both your professional ones with your clients and also with those whom your income is meant to support or whatever. But if you spend too much time walking around in Neverland, that's going to show up at some point. And I think that's it. You know, on the other hand, some of these times walking around in Neverland are what are going to bring more centeredness and creativity and balance to the work that you do. I mean, so it's like, what is the sum total of what you are doing during the day resulting in? And I think that can give you probably the best, you know, look at how you're spending your time. And again, it's what works and what doesn't work rather than what's right or what's wrong as much. But yeah, we just have to find our way. I mean, I'm like you, I can get totally lost in just about anything because the interior world for me is much louder than the exterior world. You know, it's been that way since I was a kid. I sat down yesterday to work. I had a 1 o'clock offsite appointment that was going to take me about 10 minutes to get to. And the last time I looked at the clock, it was noon. I said, great, I got plenty of time. Next time I looked at the clock, it was 1 o'clock and I was late, you know? And it's like, so I know that about myself, and I'm trying to do better by using the phone to set alarms for myself, you know, so that I can get lost and do the things I need to do creatively. Because I was doing something very creative and very good, you know, I was doing what I was supposed to be doing, but I lost track of time. And so, you know, kind of like Odysseus tying himself to the mast so that he can go past the siren song. We have to do that for ourselves. I think at times is find ways to tie ourselves to the mast so we still get the things done we need to get done that good relationship requires. But at the same time, let us use our strengths and the flow that really makes life worth living. So I don't know. You find your own ways.
And then you get to the age where, you know, you'll go to talks like this, or you'll show up here and then you'll leave and not remember the conversations or have anything to really say about.
Daniela, stop talking about me.
It only comes when the doctor begins asking if you fell. Probably.
That's a different kind of freedom right there.
Yes, it is.
I don't remember
The tougher question is, do you remember falling?
Oh,
Remember that you fell.
you know.
If you remember you fell, then you don't have dementia, at least.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, but you do have a bad hip. So, oh, but this is we're going to have plenty of stories to go to get us through 2 more weeks at this rate. I want to read one more because it's on the same theme and we don't want to break them up. So look at this last paragraph in this left-hand column. Once there was a disciple of a Greek philosopher who was commanded by his master for 3 years to give money to everyone who insulted him. When this period of trial was over, the master said to him, now you can go to Athens and learn wisdom. When the disciple was entering Athens, he met a certain wise man who sat at the gate insulting everybody who came and went. He also insulted the disciple, who immediately burst out laughing. Why do you laugh when I insult you? Said the wise man. Because, said the disciple, for 3 years I have been paying for this kind of thing, and now you give it to me for nothing. Enter the city, said the wise man, it is all yours. Abbot John used to tell the above story, saying, this is the door of God by which our fathers, rejoicing in many tribulations, enter into the city of heaven. I love that. I've been paying this for 3 years and now you give it to me for free. That's perfect. But another variation on the theme, and there are many that have to do with this idea of unoffendability and unflatterability as being the way to God and the way to salvation and freedom and forgiveness and everything else you can think of. So, but I think we've done a pretty good job here tonight in starting to break this down, because some of these principles seem so overbroad that they don't seem like they're relevant to us. They are, but we have to break them down just as we did tonight so that we can see how they apply to us specifically in our lives. And then we need to apply them even more specifically to ourselves. We have to make the principle personal to us so that it can actually be usable. But this idea of unoffendability has become huge for me. And I really try to watch the things that still manage to offend me. I can say that less and less does, and that's been nice to watch that process. But when I do get offended, then first of all, I really stop and make sure that I am monitoring every response from then on out so that I first do no harm. And then secondly, start to look deeper. So, okay, what's still raw down there that I haven't paid enough attention to, and try to go from there.
And is there some scientific fact, Dave, that says the more tired we are, the more offendable we get?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Same with hunger.
Yeah. The hangry thing, right?
Yeah, all that stuff, it takes away your awareness, doesn't it? Our awareness just goes out the tubes, and we are now just at the mercy of our reptilian brain. The lizard brain takes over. Yeah. All right, very good, guys. All right, same thing next week. We'll continue on with some more stories and see how much more trouble we can get into. But thanks. This was a great conversation. Really, really good. Thanks for the pointed question there, Doug. That really also gave us a lot more fuel. All right, Scott, you're on. You want to pray us home, buddy?
Sure, Lord. Thank you, Father God, that we can come to you with our prayers and our thoughts and our feelings and our shares and say, participate, invite you in, and you want to be there. Lord, that's what keeps me close to you, is making sure that I'm aware to invite you into my activities during the day. And I pray that we can all do that, Father God. We can find the peace that comes along with that and the joy that comes along with the relationship. Thank you for this study. Thank you for my friends in this group. Thank you for your love, Lord. We pray all this, we give our thanks in Jesus' mighty name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. All right, everybody. Good night. Sleep fast. Don't fall down.
You never know. I got to walk in the bedroom now.
Hold
With
her
your
hand, Brady.
dilated eyes.
Hold Brady's hand.
Yeah,
There you go.
I do a
Good
lot.
night.
Oh, how sweet. All right.
Bye,
Good
guys.
night.
Bye,
Bye,
guys.
Kathy.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night,
See
everybody.
you on Sunday.
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 Open Sunday. Bye, Jordana. Bye, Linda. You
Bye,
guys,
Dave.
you guys sleep well. See you soon.
Okay, see you Sunday, Dave.
Bye.